Wait.
How about now?
Oh, that's perfect. Yeah, that was it.
Hooray! Okay.
Oh, we're so glad you're here, John.
How do computers even work? Yeah,
So
I'm happy to be here. This is great.
yeah, when I heard you were going to do a session with us, I totally geeked out. And I'll try not to steal. We stole Barbara's intro. But we'll try not to steal your intro. But you're the guy who helped me transition from developing web forms in the day a couple of years ago. From started creating MVC applications. You wrote the MVC music store demo and did some excellent sessions with Christopher Harrison on the Microsoft Virtual Academy. I sold those multiple times. So thank you for that. But that's way in the past. And you've had a couple of roles since then at Microsoft.
Yeah, that's true. So my latest is I am on the .NET community team, and I'm focused. I do a lot of things. You'll see me on like the .NET community stand-up, but I'm mostly focused on .NET on Mac. So you'll see I'll be doing my presentation today on Mac, and but I just love .NET development everywhere, and I think one of the kind of superpowers of a .NET developer is that you can be a .NET developer, and one day you're building microservices like I'll be showing today, and the next you're building a mobile app or a game or whatever. And that's really pretty cool, I think.
Yeah, that's very cool. You're going to introduce us to Project Tye?
Yeah, I am.
How do you come across this? How does this work at Microsoft? How are you involved with such a cool project?
Yeah, well, so the main way I heard about it was I'm involved with the .NET community stand-up, and as part of this, every Tuesday I'm putting on, I'm hosting a show that includes, just new things that they're building. And one thing that's cool with the .NET community stand-up is that it's just focused on, here's some things we're thinking about. So sometimes we'll see new experiments. Sometimes we'll see, just all kinds of, updates, or sometimes a demo off a laptop that might not even be working yet, that kind of thing. And so that's really sort of the idea there, is that we're able to show off, here's some new stuff we're looking at. And so as part of this, the team, we did a few shows where they were focused on, it was basically, I would call it the Teach John Microservices shows, and they were showing me Kubernetes, and they were showing us, because in the real world, people are not just building simple file new project deploy, you're building more complex applications. And so as part of that, people are building microservices, like it or not, and they're having to learn how to do that, how to go about, actually building services and managing these complex services and stuff. So
yeah, perfect. Well, very much forward to your session. So I think if you're ready to take it away.
All right, let me share my screen, and I'm having a little trouble. I'm not a wonderful expert. Okay, let's share application window. I think I can share that. Cool. All right. This is slightly derpy, but I'm actually, let me see if I can show. If I show this, yeah, I think you'll see the actual use slideshow. There you go. That's the magic button. Okay. Yep. So here we go. I'm going to be talking about developing and deploying microservices with Project Tye. And last week, there was the .NET Conf focus on microservices. And so I'm showing some of the stuff that they showed there. I'm also using their wonderful slides because they're wonderful slides. And, so we're going to be talking about, we're going to see this from a slightly different side, because I am more of a .NET developer that's learning about microservices and learning about Project Tye, and this is kind of what I've learned so far. So, so first of all, here, whoops, there we go. Okay, so in just about any application, like I was saying, you don't just have one app. You very often have a web app and an API. And as I was starting with the VS for Mac team, we did a customer visit, and we were working with, pretty standard. It was a consultant shop that was working for a very large company, and they were building line of business applications. And these apps were ASP.NET Core, API backends, and a bunch of front ends. I think they were all using Vue. But this is very, very standard, is that you'll very often have a web app and an API app. And then you run into problems because, well, first of all, let's talk about why we do that. Why have microservices and why split things out? Why not just run a big monolithic application? And one thing that they pointed out for them is it gave them the opportunity to ship faster, to avoid blockers on things. So they were able to say, okay, this team is focused on whatever, say the product API, and they can move as fast as they can. And then the web app front end can move as fast as they can. And as long as they're coordinating and managing their APIs well, you don't get into a spot where you say, well, we'd like to update our products, but we're waiting on this thing and we're waiting on this thing, right? So it really allowed them to be much more agile and to deploy a lot quicker and build better applications. But a very simple thing that you run into is they were doing things like running Visual Studio for their API code and then running VS Code or a console to start up their front end. And then if you're running multiple APIs, sitting with them, they would start the app, they would start the API would fail because it wasn't connecting to another API it needed, right? So, this multi-project startup is kind of a pain. And there's ways around it. You can run batch files, you can set it up in Visual Studio. I'll show in Visual Studio Code where you can set up, your project's start, but it still is something you have to manage. Another problem you run into is service discovery. So if we've got multiple APIs, how do they all talk to each other? And so you end up with things like localhost port 5043, and then you have to, do you hard code it or do you set it in an environment variable? And then when you do, you've got to take care of deploying that to production and managing that. If your API connection changes or isn't working, it's just your application doesn't work. And that's just talking about, you'll see I've got two boxes on the right, just a web and an API, but that's not how any application in the real world works. You've got a database. You've got, maybe Redis or message queues or whatever. You've got dependencies. Lately, I've been working with this .NET Community stand-up, and we have several APIs we work with, but for instance, the YouTube API, and we have Azure Functions. And this is a very simple application, right? And so then we're dealing with managing those dependencies. So just getting started, not even talking about deploying, can take you a while. And you think about, number one, starting a new project up, and then also onboarding a new developer to your team. How long does it take for them to be productive? So that's sort of the background of, microservices are great, but they do bring some complications in. And so then you worry about, do I need to become an expert on Docker and Docker Compose and Kubernetes and all the 90,000 other things that come along with that, Helm and Istio and all just, like, what are we, Zipkin and, all the funny named things, right? So I mentioned Docker Compose, and Docker Compose does help with some of the things, but only some. And you still need to become somewhat of an expert on Docker Compose. So if you're a .NET developer, you need to learn how to do that. You need to learn how to set it up, and it adds some kind of front end load to getting started. So it is a solution, but it's maybe not the best solution. So what I'm going to be talking to you about today is Project Tye. And Project Tye is it's an experiment from the .NET team. So through November, the idea really is kind of move fast and break things. There's a lot of interest from the community. They're definitely planning to continue going, but the idea is that they really want people to understand that at this point, you shouldn't be taking heavy dependencies on Project Tye. for production. That would be rather crazy, but you should be looking at this is where we're going forward, and you should get involved. So I'm showing you right between now and November, it's considered experimental. You should expect breaking changes, but it's really awesome, and I'd like you to get excited about it now and learn about it. So some things Project Tye does. It does some really cool stuff, and I'll be showing you some demos with this, where using conventions and standard .NET project files and setup of a .NET application, it understands and kind of sets up your microservices stuff for you. So I can say .NET run, and I'm running my application, and it's kind of figured out, okay, here's how to orchestrate that and set that up. So right from the beginning, it gives me a very quick getting started approach. Then also very commonly when I create a project, now I need to track logs, and tracking logs in a distributed application is a pain. Tracking metrics, tracing, all those sorts of things, not easy to do. And so this is something where right out of the box, you can get that. You can also directly within this, you can reference Docker dependencies also. So, and I'll show you that as well, where we can create a new project and we can just reference a Docker dependency and it'll pull it right in. And then straight from there, very quick deployment experience, including an interactive command line approach that shows you doing that. And also a cool hot reload sort of support. So all this stuff kind of built around the, how can we make it easier for a .NET developer to get started and run with stuff? One thing that I personally have found with this is, I've definitely found this is much simpler than reading a ton of documentation. There's still a bit to learn, but it's a lot, quicker to get started and be productive. What I do like about this too is that it is a layer on top of these existing things. It does not replace Docker, does not replace Kubernetes or all these other services. What it does do is make it easier to configure them. And so you can still reach down into, your customization of Docker, Kubernetes, et cetera, and configure the heck out of it. But you don't have to do all that when you get started. So I like that kind of approach with any kind of developer thing. I like when things make it easy for me to get started, but I also don't like them to keep me from, making customizations if I want to later. So let's look a little bit more at that. I'm going to be building up to a voting application. And this is an example of, kind of more complex application where we've got all kinds of front ends and back ends talking to each other. And this is what they showed during the .NET Conf presentation. What I want to do actually is start with a simpler case. So I want to start with, let's make sure, yep, still running. I'm going to start with Hello World in Project Tye. So I'm going to do it from the command line. I could absolutely do this from inside Visual Studio as well, but I'm just going to show super simple getting started. So hopefully, let me blow that up super big. Okay. And we're going to do, first of all, I'm going to, what do I have in this directory? I have a global JSON, and the reason I do that is because I want to build against .NET Core 3.1. I want to be able to deploy this later. And so I just want to be building on 3.1. I actually am running locally. Locally, I've got a bunch of crazy .NET 5 stuff installed. So I don't want those. Yeah, something like that. So anyhow, that's why I've got global JSON in. And just so you know, that's super simple to do.
I'm sorry to interrupt you.
I'm still sharing the wrong thing, right? I need to share my screen. Thank you. Oops. Okay, so I will stop sharing. I will share out I think my entire screen. There we go. Wonderful. Okay, so that should work. And I think, yep, there we go. All right, so let's go in here. So what I was starting to say is I'm using global JSON to pin my .NET to .NET Core 3.1. And in this directory, all I've got is a microservices directory and it's empty. So nothing in there. Okay, so I'm going to do .NET new web app, and we'll put that in the front end directory. Okay, so this is literally a file new project web app. This is what you would get in Visual Studio if you did ASP.NET, new ASP.NET application. So now, right from the beginning, I could, well, let's pretend, let's go just one step further. Let's do like those two boxes were, and we'll do also .NET new web API, and we'll call that backend. And then the one other thing I'm going to do with this, and notice I'm not doing any Docker, I'm not writing any YAML at all. So I've got a front end and a back end. And then I'm going to do the very simple, create a new solution and add both of these to it. So, okay, so .NET new solution. And then we're going to add both of those things to it. So we'll say .NET solution add front end and back end. Beautiful. Now, I haven't actually done the work to make the two of them talk to each other, and that'd be relatively straightforward. In the front end, I would point at the back end, etc. But let's pretend that I wrote that code. Hopefully, you believe that I could actually write that code. So now what we're going to do is we'll say Tye run. So that's TYE run. That's it. I have done nothing else. Now, the one other thing that I have done is I've installed Tye on this machine, which is a one-liner, and I'll show you how to do that in a second. So now Tye is going and inspecting. Tye knows about .NET. It knows how to read a solution file. It knows how to find out, okay, these are the projects, understand what those projects are. You'll see these exciting words here, .NET or dashboard running. So that is neat. I'm already pretty happy about that. And it's building those two dependent projects. So now it shows a bunch of words on the screen. You'll show that it's already doing some stuff, and it's well, let's just go and look at that. Let's look at the 127, 8,000. So this is the dashboard it built for me. Interestingly enough, if you poke around, this is kind of fun. If you poke around in there, this is actually a Blazor application. So it's using a standard, it's hosting Blazor and it's serving up a standard Blazor app. So now I've got a front end and a back end, and I could go in here and I could say, here's my front end, and this is my standard ASP.NET app. And I could click here, and this is my web API backend. So an API doesn't have, I would have to actually browse to an API endpoint on it. But that's, so those are the things. Now, if I click on front end itself, it's actually going to tell me what I've got here, and it's going to it's already tracking metrics and stuff for me. So that's pretty cool. I also can go in and I can see the views, right? So this is, or excuse me, I can see the logs. So it's already also out of the thing, it's making it easy for me to track logs on these. And you'll see here, I tried to, browse directly to there, and there's my failure on that. So that is super cool right from the beginning, that it's able to create a very simple, front end view at this. So now let's look at a slightly more complex one, and we're going to go over to that voting application. So I'll go over, I think I've got this, and we'll do, nope, and I'll zoom this in. Always wonderful. So I have a really cool, console setup, but when you zoom, it goes just crazy. Okay, so now let's go. We want to look at voting. And so this is an application that's got here. If I did open, cool. So we'll take a look at this, and here's my voting application. And this has a front end. It's got, my front end is, web application, and it's got a vote, and I can vote. I think I've got this set up right now. Their sample showed cats and dogs, but I prefer to vote between tabs and spaces. So here we've got tabs and spaces, and we've got also a backend worker, and then we also have a results view, and the results view is authenticated. So anyone can vote, but to actually see the results, you have to be authenticated. So there's three things hooked up here, and if we look over at this diagram, we've also got some other stuff included. We've got Redis, we've got Postgres, and then we have identity servers handling the authentication. And we can actually see all that if we go into our Tye YAML. So our Tye YAML is orchestrating that stuff together. So in the example I did, where I just did Tye run, it just showed, it just automatically inferred all that stuff. It read my solution file, and it just figured that out. Now, obviously, in this case, we've got to tell it about stuff like Postgres. We've got to tell it about our Redis. And so in this case, we're giving it the connection strings. So we're saying, vote, you know how to find vote. It's a CS proj, go run it. But for something else like Postgres, we actually have to give it some more information. We have to give it the connection information. Okay, so that is all we need to do to Tye enable that, with one exception. We're also, because we're doing the discovery on the front end, or we're handling the connection management, we also need to go in and we need to say, read the connection from configuration. So it's actually reading the stuff like here, configuration, get connection string, Redis. And it's actually getting that from, so we tell Tye, here's all your connection information. Tye populates that stuff into environment variables, and then when we run, that stuff is made available using standard .NET configuration. So a lot of talking. Let's see if this actually runs. So if I do Tye run, so what it's doing here, it's inspecting that Tye YAML, and it's using that, again, it goes through it understands the solution file, it understands how to read the different configuration, it sets a bunch of environment variables, it bootstraps that stuff, and hopefully, fingers crossed, it creates that dashboard, and the dashboard shows all the stuff running. So we'll give that just a second to spin up. So here's all the logs as it spins stuff up. And this, you could do this today, by the way. This is, I cloned the Tye repo. I went into the samples directory. I go to the voting folder and I say Tye run. As it's spinning up, let me show you the few tiny things I did here. If I go into Tye, this is the Tye repo, so it's .NET/Tye. And then if you go into documentation, and the first thing in the documentation is getting started. So step one, install Tye. You need .NET Core. You install Tye as a global tool, and that's it. So from then on out, you'll see the thing that I did before with front end, back end. It's all right here. And then I did Tye run, and Tye run just works. So this is like the world's quickest getting started experience. So now I've got the voting sample running, and you'll see here's my dashboard. So this is a standard .NET microservice application with multiple things going on. We told it about it through Tye.yaml, and then we read in all the connections using the standard configuration setting stuff, and here we go. So if I go in to this, and I put my vote in for tabs, do a few votes there. So that's that, right? And then if I go into, we can go and look at the docs or the logs, and you'll see it's got those logs showing all that stuff that happened. We can see our metrics here. So, it's configured all that stuff for us. It's also got Redis, right? So we can see, if we go into Redis, we can see our logs for our connection and our stuff going on with Redis as well. And again, all that we did here to set up Redis was tell it about it in our YAML file. And here we're going with Postgres. So that's kind of the going from, we did file new project, create a few little things, and Tye inferred all this stuff from it. Then we go into a more complicated sample, And here, if we go use slide view, okay. So here we see this is this more, complex application, more real world, and we just saw that in action. Now, a next step here is deploying, and as an example, with a more complex application like this, I would be worried about deploying this sort of thing as a microservice, even with Docker and everything. There's a lot of orchestration going on. So here's what Tye is doing for us. First of all, it pulls this configuration in. So those configuration settings that I showed you in Tye.yaml, it can work with those as secrets in Kubernetes, which is really good. You don't want to be handling your application secrets, your passwords, your connection strings, all those things. You don't want those to be in simple raw files, right? You want those to be on your server. You want those to be using secret storage. So those are sent over to Kubernetes. Then all our different stuff, so our .NET applications need to be pulled into a Docker image, and it actually then at that point needs to be put into a container registry. And so a container registry could be something like Docker Hub, or it could be running my own container registry. And that's so then Kubernetes can connect to that. So then from the container registry, that can be deployed over into Kubernetes, and boom, that's exciting. So I'm actually going to show you a simple. Yep.
I'm interrupting yet again, but your screen was gone.
Oh no. Okay.
Share?
So let's see. I will stop sharing. How long did I miss?
I think about 20 seconds, 20 to 40.
Oh, okay. All right. And now? Good. Okay. How about now? Are we good?
Yeah, perfect.
Good. Okay. So now what I'd like to do is I'm going to go back to our very simple application that we built at the beginning that had front end and back end. Okay. So we had, okay. So here's my simple application, and it had front end, back end. Imagine as well that it has all these other things, has Docker, things with Postgres and all kinds of stuff. So let's look at what would be involved with, actually, I do want to show deployment. Yeah, let's show deployment, but then after that, I'm going to show Zipkin because that's a fun thing. So we'll do Tye deploy interactive. I'm typing from memory, so we'll see how well that goes. Okay, so what it's doing again, it's inspecting, it's got my Tye YAML, and it's going in and it's taking a look at my application, and it's trying to infer a lot of stuff. And in order to do this, I actually have a few things running locally. So just when you see this, it's so that it's not all just completely magic. If you want to do this as well yourself, you can go in here, and there is in the Tye thing, there's a deployment tutorial, and you're going to want to look at this. So there's a few things to have set up. I'm running Minikube. So Minikube's very simple and easy to get set up. So that's what I'm running. And then I also have Docker Hub set. I have a container registry configured at Docker Hub. So those are my things that I've already done ahead of time. And you'll see, I think I've got one of these windows. I had Minikube running. We'll see if it's working. So I'll type in my name because that's my Docker Hub. So the steps here again, if you'll remember all those fancy animations on the slide, is it's grabbing my information from my Tye YAML, it's pushing that stuff over to Docker Hub, and then it's going to deploy it to my Kubernetes cluster. And in this case, my Kubernetes is running on my local machine running Minikube. So Minikube is, and actually, yeah, okay. And I don't know if it'll even run, but this is the steps you would run through. So you'll see some neat things there, like validating secrets and stuff like that. So it should publish this out. Building, pushing. So there it's pushing the Docker images. So there we've gone through and done the deployment. Now, interestingly enough, the project team has said so far they've seen the big majority of the usage has been actually the development time. And while this is great that, I can deploy my stuff out to Kubernetes, to Docker, etc., don't fixate on that, because really what I feel, if I had not done this deployment, just the stuff that we already had with things like this cool dashboard and stuff is pretty cool, right? So that's, don't think of it just as it's nice for deploying your stuff. And we can actually see if we go to, I think it's AKMS Tye demo, they've got this exact same thing running in a cluster. They're going with cats and dogs, and you can see this. So this is that thing that I just ran through deploying to Kubernetes. This is deployed to an actual public endpoint in AKS. So that's kind of the example there of deployment. So again, pretty smooth deployment experience, and not a whole bunch of configuration to set up in order to do that. So that's pretty neat. So another really cool thing is extended features. So there's a lot of support for things like Azure Functions, Dapper, etc. And the idea is, again, that Tye can know about and understand a lot of the common things that you would integrate with, and just be able to set that up for you. So the two things I want to show you is Azure Functions, and then I want to show you diagnostics with Zipkin. So let's see if I can get that done in time. Am I still sharing okay?
No, your screen's gone again. I think it was after the console window closed, or
how on earth? How does? Okay, so
yeah,
let's.
sorry about this. There's some technical.
Okay, that's fine. I host shows, and this stuff happens constantly to us too. It's wonderful. Okay, so yep, there I go. Okay. So the two things I want to show is the microservices deployment. So we'll do here, let's go, let's zoom that up slightly. Okay. So we're going to take the microservices, and of course I'm showing with command line, and partly that's because it's so simple, and I kind of want to show you that, and it's also quick to navigate around. Some people get worried about, like, oh no, I have to type a bunch of commands, and you definitely can do this in the you can be working in VS Code, Visual Studio. I'm using Visual Studio for Mac as well. So let's go in here, and there's an Azure Functions area. So if I go CD Azure Functions, and I'm going to go into CD front end. And this front end back end is the exact same thing that I showed you before with this web API and a front end, and they're connecting to each other. I also have Azurite running. I hope I have Azurite running. Let's see. So you need Azurite running locally if you are going to be using Azure Functions on a Mac, because you need a storage backend. So that's all it is. Azurite is a cool open source tool that's out there and works well. So now I'll go Tye. So if we look in here, there's not a lot of stuff. There is a Tye. That's all we've got in our Tye YAML. So there's front end and a back end. So then we'll go Tye run. And this is connecting to our we have an Azure function, and the Azure function is just a super simple, function that's handling the front end, back end communication stuff. What's neat with this is, again, in the dashboard, it just knows how to set this up. Oops. No, I don't want to go. So the problem there is that I still was linked into something from the previous there. So here it knows that it's a type function, right? And it's able to, like, if we go into the logs, these are if you've used Azure Functions, which I hope you have, this is showing all the standard output stuff from Azure Functions. Now, this is a very new feature, and so this is only supported right now for local development. It doesn't handle the deployment stuff, but it'd be pretty easy, to deploy and, just point at your Azure function. So that's pretty cool. I want to show you one more thing in demo land before we go and kind of wrap up. I think I have like 5 more minutes, right? Okay, so in here's our front end, back end. Actually, let's go over again to this. So if we go, open this up in Code Insiders, because why not? Just hop around everywhere. And I'm going to see if I can do this. I want to hook up this extensions Zipkin. And so what I'm doing with this, you'll see this is in the recipes, and they have some really cool recipes, and this is one here. So inside this, I'm just doing extensions name Zipkin. So let's try that. And I think I can put that, yes. Okay, extensions. And I do, yeah, like that. YAML still keeps throwing me sometimes. Name. And Zipkin is a cool thing that handles distributed tracing. So it makes it a lot easier to see what's going on. A problem that you run into in distributed applications is seeing what the heck went on and what failed, and if something's taking a while, what's taking all that time, or if something went wrong, what thing went wrong, which connection failed. So all I did there was I wrote in 2 lines. I just said extension Zipkin. So what's really cool here, you'll see in my console log here, is it's actually pulling in Zipkin as a Docker image. So it's pulling in Zipkin, it's configuring it because it just knows, microservices on .NET. So I don't have to go in and say, okay, front end, you're logging here and you're doing this and you're doing that. And hopefully this is set up, although, yeah. There is one other thing that needs to happen, and I'm not sure if that's configured. Let's see if this works. Go here. So there's that. And then if I go into here, we'll go to our front end. So there's one other configuration step, and I'm not sure, oops, where you actually have to set the logging format. Even that, let's see if that works. So what it will do, I don't have the correct logging format set up, and I'm just kind of winging it here. But what you will see when you do this is this really cool distributed trace where it actually connects the front end and the back end. And the one thing that I'm kind of rushing through, and I'm not going to show you now, but it's seriously just a couple lines of code, is you need to set the logging format. So you have to go into your startup and you have to set this logging format. And that's what's required in order to set up distributed tracing. And that is an actual W3C spec, which is really cool. So, so those are kind of the steps of getting that set up. Let me see. Actually, yeah, I'm not going to take you through that, but that's that's really all that's required to set that up. So that's pretty cool, and that's included. There are a lot of other things that are included with that too as well. So there's diagnostics, integration with Dapper. So, very, very quick and simple integration with Dapper. A new thing too is multi-repo scenarios. So being able to set it up. I've been showing you stuff that's all working in one directory, but you can actually reference another repo, and pull stuff in from there as well. So that is it. Do we have time for questions?
Well, we're a bit short on time, but
okay.
We have one question from Martijn, but he also said you already answered it in the session. But it is could Tye handle dependencies that are not managed in a solution file?
Yes. So, and that is a really cool thing, is that you can, and let me show very quickly here. There's if we go into the docs.
I think you have to share your screen again.
All right. Well, so in the docs, they show how to handle dependencies, and they have a whole kind of, it's a documented format that shows how to, how you can reference things. So it's just in your Tye YAML, you can link to Docker images, you can link to, all kinds of other stuff, other repositories. You can link to different dependencies. So definitely that's sort of the idea, is that by convention, it's great at inspecting your solution, but it's also great at, you can go in and point it at whatever you'd like. So,
okay. Yeah. Perfect. Well, it was very cool. I really enjoyed your session. I'm definitely going to look into this because this is so awesome. Is
Great.
there anything you could share on the roadmap? Do you know anything, insights on what they're adding as to functionality?
Yeah, well, they just shipped 0.4, so that's kind of the newest stuff. Some things that they are adding is so my understanding is like Azure Functions, they're building more in with Azure Functions to actually be able to deploy it. I do think, let me see, they do have links over to the roadmap in here somewhere. They also have contributing guidelines, which is cool. So yeah. So, and like it says here, they're posting about every 2 weeks. So the main thing, really, they're kind of working up to, and then also here they have the projects. So yeah, I don't know. This doesn't look super up to date there. So the main thing, really, I think, is working towards the November kind of release.
Yeah.
One other thing I really want to kind of point people to is if it's running, it's not running. When I have this thing running, there's it's thing here where it says, tell us what you think. And that is a quick survey that you can fill out. And when you do that, that is really helpful to the team because that helps them focus on what they should be building and how you're using the application or using Tye, et cetera.
Yeah.
So
perfect.
Yeah. So, and then the place to kind of get started and learn everything about it is right here in Tye. And then if you scroll down, like you saw me kind of from scratch write a bunch of stuff. If you go into the documentation, and this is some of the best docs that I've seen a new project create. If you can go through these in maybe an hour, but you can do these first two in about 10 minutes. It's really pretty quick. So
the stuff you showed us really made me think I could do this as well. So that's usually a good sign.
Good. Yeah. Like I said, I'm a total newbie at microservices, and it makes me happy to work with something that just kind of works so quickly. So, yeah.
Well, thank you so much. It really was great.
Great. Thank you.
I think we'll be working to our next session from Kushik.
Okay.
Yeah, again, a lot of thanks, and hope to see you again.
Okay. All right. Thanks a bunch.
Thank you.